Welcome everyone to another exciting edition of the Magic Sandwich Show, where I am joined by some of the usual suspects, Thunderfoot and Concordance, who I had the pleasure of meeting in Austin only last weekend. It seems much longer, but great pleasure to meet him. But also our very special guest for today, Peter Sinclair, also known as Greenman on YouTube. And I'm going to kick off straight away with Peter. For those that may not be aware of your channel, Greenman on YouTube, tell us a little bit about it and what it's all about.
Yeah, the channel is greenman3610, and for the last 5 years or so, I have been pushing out a lot of videos dealing with climate change, and in particular with these crunchy little nuggets of disinformation about climate change that you'll hear on talk radio or certain TV channels, or perhaps in the Daily Mail, that can be spoken in maybe 15 seconds, but take an honest climate scientist an hour and a half to disentangle. And I refer to them as the climate crocs. And so the channel is Climate Denial Crock of the Week. And there's well over 100 videos at this point, and it's been an ongoing seminar for me in the basic outlines of climate science. And in the course of the last 5 years, I've developed pretty good, tight working relationships with a number of the leading scientists in the field: glaciologists, oceanographers, meteorologists, etc. And they communicate with me frequently. And more I'm interviewing them personally to knock down whatever I think the latest bit of misinformation is that needs to be dealt with. And in the last year, in fact, I was asked to start a companion series which is running on the Yale University Forum on climate change in the media, and that series is called "This Is Not Cool." And so DPR, you've been a big ally of this series in the past by helping me to do some online fundraising and grant seeking, and that's why I wanted to let you know about a more recent project that I'm working on with one of the foremost Greenland experts on the planet, Dr. Jason Box. Dr. Box contacted me about 6 or 8 months ago. We've been talking back and forth for a while, and he asked me if I would be interested in documenting a expedition that he's planning to Greenland this coming summer. And the purpose of the expedition is to investigate the great why the ice sheet seems to be melting so rapidly, and why that melt is accelerating, and whether it could possibly be related to increasing amounts of dark soot from more and more wildfires that are burning across North America in the summertime, gradually darkening the ice sheet, increasing the absorption of sunlight, and accelerating that melt. And what's additionally unique about the project is that we've decided to fund it online through a crowdsourcing effort. Dr. Box got a little bit of seed money after his research was written up in Rolling Stone magazine last summer, and we've used that to put together a web page. It is darksnowproject.org, and we've been raising funds through that for several months now, and we've just reached the point in the last few days where we can say this trip it looks like a go. We've cut everything to bare bones to make sure that we can indeed do it. We want to continue fundraising so that it will expand our capabilities as much as possible when we do get there. And we have some events coming up, both online and in reality, in New York City, as a matter of fact, in coming weeks that I want to talk about during the course of this broadcast. I'm hoping some people might be interested in coming out.
We'll certainly come on to the details, but just before we do, somebody in the chat was asking whether you have a Facebook page that they'd be able to follow. Can I just remind people that, as usual, these videos or this show will be posted on YouTube, and all the links necessary will be posted in the description of those videos, so I can include it there. But do you have a Facebook?
I do. I think if you search Facebook...
Don't worry about posting the link now. As I say, we'll include it in the YouTube videos when they're posted. And as I said, before we get into the details, I just want to take a step back, if I may, and ask this question. Obviously, you still have the likes of climate deniers such as Alex Jones and people like that. But have you seen, well, firstly, is there really any serious doubt about the fact that there is global warming? And have you seen a change in attitudes amongst the general public about global warming?
I think in the United States we turned a bit of a corner last summer with the extremes that we saw, from fires to drought to storms, that really hit home in the heartland very hard, but maybe even more importantly landed right on top of the major media in New York City in the form of Superstorm Sandy, which, although we can't blame any hurricane in particular on global warming, we can say that that hurricane behaved in a way unique among hurricanes in the observed record of the last century or so. And it's consistent with some of the changes in atmospheric circulation that we've seen in the last 5 or 10 years. So with all of that, it's not that we've seen a huge turn in poll numbers, but what we have seen is things have definitely bottomed out from, say, 2 or 3 years ago. And the number of people who get that climate change is happening and that we really ought to do something about it is, at this point, a solid majority. And you can quibble about how to subdivide that majority, but basically, there is certainly a working political majority among the population of voters that gets it. The roadblock is still in Republicans in Congress, who are firmly under the control of the most radical, what we call Tea Party conservative element here in the United States, because although they are a tiny minority of voters, they exercise great control because they come out in large numbers during the primary process when candidates get nominated. So every Republican lives in terror of straying from this radical conservative line, which includes, among other things, climate change denial.
It's a great shame, isn't it? I'm sorry, I'm going to invite Concordance to take over, but just before Concordance does step in, can I just remind people that we are still a live call-in show, and if you would like to join us to discuss any of the issues that we're discussing or any other issues that you think may be relevant, please send a Skype contact request to Magic Sandwich Show, all one word, all lowercase. Include in that contract request, please, the gist of the topic or question that you would like to raise, and we'll see if we can get you on. Concordance.
Yeah, I knew that global warming was a fact when the Discovery Institute started opposing it. Right, that's a pretty sure indicator. But isn't it interesting? I'm sure I'm trying to play out in my head the political discussion that would make the Republicans want to own what is increasingly obviously the wrong side to take. What was the conversation, do you think, in the Republican inner sanctum when they're drinking their goblets full of young children's blood? What kind of things do you think that they were thinking? I understand that they're sort of the party of industry, but how does it help you to deny something that is self-evident after a certain period of time? Peter, what do you think?
Well, you hit upon a pretty good point there in that over the last 5 or 10 years, we've noticed an increasing number of Republican candidates at all levels who, when asked if they believe in evolution, will say no. And that is in itself evidence of the, I guess you'd call it, success of the Republican program over the last 40 years, the so-called Southern strategy, which has been to increasingly strategically try to use, let's say, racist, ignorant, Southern, older white people as pawns in order to swing elections. And the problem that they've run into is that those people have come into the party at the grassroots en masse, and they include a large number of rigidly fundamentalist religious type people who are poorly educated. They're anti-science. They're anti-evolution, and basically climate change sort of runs afoul of their gut instincts, which is that I guess that somehow it's non-biblical because it's not included in the Book of Apocalypse or whatever it is that they perceive as the revealed truth.
How about this one, Peter? I'm looking here at I think it's a Pew Research Center. I think the most recent one it's 2010, October 2010, and I'm looking at this on the NCSE website. And the question was asked, in your view, is global warming a very serious problem, somewhat serious? 33, I'm not getting to the most important one. Here it is. Almost twice as many Republicans, 87% of Democrats, and only 44% of Republicans say there is solid evidence that the average temperature on Earth has been rising. And Democrats at 57% are 3 times as likely as Republicans at 19% to say that that is the result of human activity, or primarily human activity. 48% of Democrats regard this as very serious, but only 19% of Republicans think it is very serious.
Yeah, I think those numbers sound about right. I've heard some slight variance on that. There are some other polls that show larger numbers of Republicans at least accept that the planet is warming, whether or not they understand that it's man-caused. But what you do see is overwhelmingly, when you put together Democrats and independents, independents track very much like Democrats in this. So you have a large majority of Democrats who are basically science positive, and you have a fairly sized majority of independents who basically say, let's trust the scientists and let's do something about this. So Republicans are, I don't know, something like maybe 30-40% of the electorate, and so the actual number of these hardcore deniers in the population as a whole is relatively small.
The bad news is that apparently acceptance is dropping. We're talking strictly about the idea of anthropogenic, human-caused global warming hit its peak according to this Pew survey. And again, these numbers are not always reliable, but it peaked in July 2006. At 50% saying that global warming is likely the result of human activity. In October 2010, it was down to 34%. Probably as a result of changes in weather. What do you think about that? The fact that it's actually decreasing.
Well, I think that's right, but that you're missing the tail end there because 2006, 2007, you had a peak. 2009, you had the very, very effective so-called ClimateGate non-scandal that got totally bamboozled the press. Plus, we've had in there 2008, 2009. We had a couple years that were strong La Nina years, which caused quite a bit of severe snowstorms, actually, both in in North America and in Europe. Severe weather that we are now understanding even better is now we understand is related to circulation changes due to shrinking Arctic ice. But in the last, I would say 2012, what you're seeing is those poll numbers are starting to bounce back up on the science positive side, and a lot of people are beginning to connect the dots between not just heat or cold, but severe weather of all types, which anyone over the age of 30 or 40 recognizes is something outside of their experience. And people are getting it that, oh, this is what climate change looks like. And that realization is starting to take hold.
Let's move on to Stefan. Thank you for your patience, Stefan. What have you got for us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Perfectly, yes.
Okay. My question is, how many people in the atheist or skeptic community they would describe themselves as climate skeptics, or we would say climate deniers? How big or how many are there in our atheist community?
Who would like to take
Well,
Peter.
Well, let me just say, first of all, I'll say that I do get a few commenters on my comment stream of the videos who say that they're atheists and that they're denying climate change.
Do you need to get your phone, by the way, Peter?
No, somebody else is going to get that.
Okay.
Sorry about that. But
that's okay.
But I've been invited to a number of skeptic gatherings here around my local area to speak, and the last one was just a couple months ago, and there was, I don't know, maybe 40, 50 people there. There didn't seem to be a whole lot of blowback of any kind. I think the people that are serious about science, even if they're not scientists themselves, are more inclined to trust our mainstream organizations like the National Academy and NASA and the various scientific societies.
I mean, I know that if Owen was here, he would have a rant. And by the way, Owen may be joining us later, we're not too sure. He would have a rant by saying that the religious take the Bible literally and take the message from God literally, that, you know, use up the earth, go and multiply and have no thought for the morrow and everything. And this sort of like does have a knock-on effect. I mean, it was Sarah Palin, I think, that was it her that when asked about lack of oil resources, said drill, 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 or was it dig, dig, dig? I can't remember. You know, they
drill,
don't seem,
baby, drill.
Okay, they don't, well, take over a third if you will. I mean, they don't seem to have an idea about the environment in the same way as I think that awful thing to say, more rational people, and I do count atheists as being more rational than theists have. Do you think there's any validity in that? Thunder? You can unmute your mic if you like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good start. I mean, I've actually known people who are, you know, full-blooded research academics in numerous sciences, and they bought into all that Lord Monckton bunk. And it's been very interesting, the conversations that we've had over the last, 5 years, in that the position has become more and more untenable. You know, there are all these sort of muddying of the waters that went on in things like whatever it was, the Great Global Warming Swindle. Is that what it was called?
That's correct.
Yeah, and the ClimateGate emails and all that sort of thing. And the ClimateGate emails were Yeah, it's actually driving across America the summer after that, and I listened to quite a lot of conservative radio when I was doing that, and folks like Glenn Beck and Hannity, they were basically non-stop on it, that this was the slam dunk, that the whole thing was some sort of great conspiracy by this niche bunch of scientists. And it's one of the most poorly thought out conspiracy theories ever, in the the amount of funding that goes into climate science is peanuts compared to the amount of money oil companies and the such like can and do throw at this problem, or do throw at sort of funding disinformation on the subject. But anyway, yeah, this hardcore climate change denial guy has been slowly running out of arguments over the last 5 years. And this, I think, is what Concordance was pointing out earlier, is anyone who has any sense at all knows that the scientists have got it right, and that if you're going to put all of your money on a card, so to speak, you want to be on the winning side. And that's why when I saw that there were all these conservatives saying that no, it's all bunk, that they're backing the wrong horse. And when the NCSE started on this, it's bloody obvious that that in another 10, 20, 30 years' time, it's going to be bloody obvious that they were right all along.
Let me make a couple of points here. First of all, it's not completely bleak in terms of let's say people of faith, and I don't really think I fit into any particular category myself, but I've talked to climate scientists like Catherine Hayhoe of Texas Tech, John Cook of the blog skepticalscience.com, both of whom are well versed in climate science and are themselves evangelical Christians. So that it's not completely hopeless on that score. Secondly, I have spoken to some very senior Republicans in the Congress, people that I've known for a while, and basically said to them, you guys are going to have to figure out how you're going to walk this back, because you are so far out on a limb that if you think you're out of step with the country on immigration and gay sex and abortion, wait till people fully wake up to this climate issue in the next 3 to 5 or 10 years. This party is going to be a pariah like nothing we've ever seen, maybe in history. And I think they get that. I think I've been told that senior Republican pollsters are up, and they are telling people this, but they're trapped by this primary process, which is completely dominated by the far right Taliban wing of the party.
Yes, and can I just pick up on a comment or a couple of comments that we made by W1M2 in the chat when he says, Glenn Beck and Sean Hannity are idiots, but it goes on to say, well, perhaps that's just their TV persona, and I'm sure it is. But it sort of goes back to Concordance's point. Who is the driving force about denying global warming when it comes to Fox News and the like, and why?
Do you know that there's no reason why that global warming should have been correct? And I think it was the right thing to do, to be skeptical initially. And there's a big gap between skepticism and denialism. And I'll tell you when my skepticism was most heightened, and that was when I saw Al Gore, sort of jumping up and down on the screen. I think Al Gore has done a lot to harm the environmental, the scientific global warming position, just because he created a certain amount of credibility gap when he turned it into much more of a political issue. And the more the Democrats own it, the more the Republicans seem to have to back off of it. But I take the example of Michael Shermer, who's someone I admire, and was at a time an environmental skeptic. He was, someone who was prepared to hear the evidence at any given time, but took the position that anthropogenic global warming was probably not good science. And he based that on conversations he'd had with people. And I think that's a good position for him to have had at the time. There comes a time, and the same thing is true, for example, with HIV/AIDS. There were a lot of independent theories when people were starting to put the pieces together. And even for 4 or 5 years after that, I think it was legitimate to continue asking the questions, is this good science? Are we missing something? Are we assuming too much? Has this become so politicized that we can't think outside the box a little bit and come up with a more explanatory process? And the scientists were fighting about it. And as long as the scientists can't make up their mind and you've got a 60-40 split or a 70-30 split, I think it's perfectly okay to be skeptical, where skeptical means withholding, committing to one position or the other. There comes a time, though, when 95 or 99% of the scientists are all agreeing, yeah, the evidence is all pointing in one direction, or we no longer have enough of a reasonable doubt to withhold judgment on this. And then you've got to go out and sell that. And maybe that's partly the fault of the scientists, in that they've allowed themselves to become political pawns in what is becoming part of the polemicizing debate on social and environmental issues. We really should have presented this to the children in the textbooks, and I know that the Discovery Institute is opposing that as hard as they can, but it should have been simply presented as science, like we present gravity or the change in the definition of Pluto, right? Those manage to avoid becoming political issues. You don't have the Republicans fighting to keep Pluto a planet and Democrats fighting to make it a planetoid. That's not the kind of issue we're fighting here. It's an economic issue. And we should have seen that coming. We should have done a better job of keeping politics out of it.
I'll just want to make a quick point. With Al Gore, I'm always torn on whether he did more good than harm. Now, in terms of credibility, I think you're right that he did lend those who were skeptical legitimate voice, but he also did make it an issue in a way that it hadn't really been an issue before. So in other words, there are two factors here. How many people think it's an issue and how many people are sort of well informed on it. So I think he scored very well on actually making it an issue. And yes, you're right, there was, I would say, collateral damage done to the position, but was that acceptable loss for making it a bigger issue, making it a more discussed issue? Because I've always held the opinion that, with the controversial issues, if you can just get people talking about it, then generally the better arguments win.
I'm going to have to excuse myself for a few moments. Peter.
Yes. Okay. In regard to Al Gore, if you read his book from 1990, Earth in the Balance, he describes the global warming problem in terms that would sound just about completely contemporary today. He grasped the issue 20-some years ago far better than most people, certainly most politicians, still grasp it today. So he had a really good handle on the science, and he didn't just jump in because he thought this was some kind of an opportunity for him. He has been sincerely speaking about this for a long, long time, and I think when his someone offered him the opportunity to make a movie about his using his slideshow, I think he probably just had the same kind of chain of thought that I had, which is basically nobody's talking about this, or not enough people are talking about this. This is not just the biggest story of the year. This might be the biggest story of the geological epoch, and we need to start discussing it and dealing with it, because we as human beings have a huge input here that could work to our great harm if we don't do it intelligently. So I take issue when people say, "Oh, this was really bad form for Al Gore," because you have to remember that there has been a 20-25 year, very highly funded, very focused, very professional effort to skew and distort the science of climate change, and it has been modeled very much on the same tools that were developed by tobacco companies in skewing the science about tobacco, which they successfully did for 30 or 40 years. And that cost many tens or hundreds of millions of people their lives and their health. And these same tools, and in fact, sometimes the very, very same people, have been involved in applying those methods to distort and create the perception that there's a great deal of controversy among scientists on these issues. There's a lot of controversy on the details of how climate change is going to play out in one area of the atmosphere or the globe or the oceans, and over what period of time. But the basic physics of greenhouse gases have been pretty well agreed upon for 60 or 70 years. And the only people that would say that there isn't a problem here would be about the same percentage as people that say HIV virus does not cause AIDS, for instance.
So what I think I'm trying to say is, if they had gotten Morgan Freeman up there, I think that we wouldn't be having this topic of discussion, because anything Morgan Freeman says, I'm just going to believe it. It doesn't matter. He could say
because
something like, penguins cure cancer, because he's friggin' Morgan Freeman. But you put Al Gore up there, and if I'd put
the politician, he carries the baggage of being a politician.
The politician with the vested interests, who 50% or 52% of the country think is the Antichrist. If you got Hitler up on the stage and had him talk about the importance of financial planning or tooth care, dental care, people would automatically have their hackles raised, and it would become this whole politicized thing. Well, if you brush your teeth, Hitler wins. You would actually have people suddenly begin to question that. And that's what I'm saying is, it was not that I would in any way deny him the right to speak about something he's very passionate about. The danger was putting someone on stage as the front man for the movement who had a credibility gap. He had vested interests. He had conflicts of interest. He had an opportunity to draw all this fire, as someone who, for example, takes a jet around the country. Well, instantly on Facebook, we start hearing about, the fact that his jet consumed X number of, produced this much CO2, and that his talks around the country were causing this much damage versus the average person who's sitting at home. Well, that causes a problem, right? That becomes more of an issue. They just chosen Morgan Freeman. Or David Attenborough. That would have been a nice one, too.
That's actually a really good idea.
I think David Attenborough has talked about this. I don't know about Morgan Freeman, but at a certain point, I think there was such a vacuum in the conversation in general, considering the gravity of the issue, that if you're sitting there on a certain body of knowledge and you have the capability of making yourself heard, it's hard for me from finally just jumping in himself. Now, the way that his because of his persona, the way that a lot of the denialist pushback has taken the form of attacks specifically on Al Gore. And so I would agree that's been effective among some constituents, but you know, I always push back against the Gore bashing, because I just think, come on, you know, most of what you're hearing is distortion talking points that are set up by right-wing think tanks, and they're designed to divert you from the actual topic to I hate Al Gore.
I agree, and I think they
discuss the science.
I think they walked into that. The people behind the what is it? Crisis? What's the name of his movie? The Gore movie?
Inconvenient Truth.
Inconvenient Truth. The people behind that really should have seen that coming. I mean, that would become a touchstone issue. Again, just like a lack of planning. I wish they had approached the problem a little bit differently, and maybe held off on that one. Anyway, that's my. I'm not Gore bashing at all. I think politically it was a bad move.
Having said that, in many ways, and having had Gore break the ice, it does make it a lot less risky for other people to throw their lot in. So, for instance, if you were trying to get someone like Morgan Freeman to actually go out on a limb, you know, he would have to be really involved in the matter to actually sort of undertake such a gamble. Whereas now that Gore's done it first, if you like, it does make it, I think, less risky. People know what they're getting themselves in for. But are we ready to go on this movie, by the way, Tony?
Well, just as Tony's hopefully getting back to us on that, I had to step away. I apologise for that. But have we discussed Lord Monckton? Because I have to say that looking at Potholer's videos, that it is Potholer at his best when he debunks Lord Monckton. Is that goggly-eyed idiot still making money out of spreading disinformation?
Can I jump in?
Please, I was inviting you.
Please do.
I'm working on a Monckton video right this moment, which will probably be posted either tonight or tomorrow morning. Because he was recently on a tour of Australia and had some nonsense to say about sea ice, which I picked up on. Monckton has actually been I don't think I'm giving up any strategy or anything when I say that Monckton is certainly the preferred spokesman for climate denial as far as any of the scientists or the rational side of the debate is concerned, because he's legitimately empirically crazy. And having had some long conversations with him, I interviewed him at some length several months ago. He's just so disconnected from reality, and he's kind of coming out of the closet as a he's full on Obama birth certificate in Kenya, and he's joined forces with some kind of neo-Nazi quasi-religious group in Australia that's a full-on creationist group, and he's basically coming out with so many just absolutely crazy statements that he's claimed that he's cured AIDS. Yeah, he's cured AIDS, and I asked him when his clinical studies were going to begin. He assured me that was going to be very soon.
You are kidding me that he actually. I thought that was just some sort of throwaway claim that it's like Al Gore actually having. There's that claim where it sounds like he'd invented, like he claims that he invented the internet. Now, I've heard
Oh, no.
similar claims, Monckton, but he actually stands by it that he has cured AIDS.
He's developed a treatment for AIDS that that he thinks is effective, and he claims that that it will stand up in clinical trials. And I did a video on that, and if you check out my playlist.
Are you able to tell us in broad or general details what his cure is?
No, I don't know what it is.
He's
But,
he's not letting on, or you just don't understand his...
I gather that he used it on himself, so draw your own conclusions. Not necessarily to cure AIDS, to cure something else that he had.
But
I guess it cures everything.
You suggested at the beginning of your comments that he was the sort of like preferred spokesperson for global warming denialism. This is as good as they get. That's the question.
The question is there nobody who's better?
Do any climate change denialists impress you? I mean, if you're saying that he's the sort of like preferred one, I mean, are there any better than him?
Well, as far as actual scientists that have, you know, a degree that can talk the lingo and actually understand or are capable of understanding the science, you probably have Roy Spencer and John Christie of the University of Alabama, who are acknowledged scientists. They are both fundamentalist religionists, and they actually both have some well documented and long-held blind spots about the data, which they finally fessed up to, but they haven't changed their basic views. But Richard Lindzen of MIT would be another one, and I think, and here's the important thing, what all of these legitimate scientists will tell you is that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Human beings are adding more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. That's measurable. And as we add more, we will see warming. The argument comes in as to what the degree of warming is going to be. And so they have, or claim to have, different ideas about how the atmosphere will respond to the carbon dioxide forcing, and will it be as much of a response as the mainstream science has been telling us for decades.
Thunder, I think you wanted to make a comment. Oh, maybe not. Well, whilst you're thinking about it, can I just invite Tony, if you're looking in the background, Tony, would like to play that video fairly soon. Just so people understand that Tony, I'm sure most people know, does our technical stuff and the streaming of the show, and he's got a video that hopefully he'll be able to play us, but he seems to have walked away from his computer at the moment. He's not getting back to us. So whilst we're waiting for Tony, if I may, Thunder, just ask a couple of questions of Peter. How deep is the hole that we've got ourselves in? How easy is it going to be to reverse it, and what sort of timescale are we looking at, and what sort of effects are we likely to see in the following years? That's quite a few questions, but if you could do your best with those.
We're in a very deep hole. Different people will give you different answers about how deep that hole is. I think there's a general agreement among people who talk about these issues, is that when you give an audience details about the science, you have to kind of check yourself at a certain point so as not to just drive everyone off the cliff into hopelessness. The big questions that are out there are to what degree and at what pace are we going to see some of the feedback mechanisms kick in? And one of the major feedbacks is Arctic sea ice, and we're seeing that pretty close to a century, or at least 50 or 60 years ahead of what we would have thought just a few years ago. The major ice sheets, Greenland and Antarctica, are about a century ahead of what we would have thought a decade ago. We're seeing some as yet what would have been kind of completely unexpected changes in atmospheric circulation related to Arctic ice loss that are starting to really pound the northern hemisphere temperate zones with climate extremes and weather extremes. And we're in a position where even if we were to stop completely emitting greenhouse gases instantaneously, we would still expect to see 50 or 60 years of further warming that's already in the pipeline from deep ocean heat that is gradually moving through the system. So I think what most scientists will tell you is that we're going to take a hit. The question is, can we pull ourselves back in time so that that is a manageable hit rather than a planet-busting hit? And
well, can I just pause you there, because this goes to the question
Sure.
about effects, and you say a planet. I'm sorry, you already said it a moment ago. A planet something hit.
planet-busting hit.
Planet-
Yeah. What are you referring to? Are you talking about greater weather effects, more flooding? I mean, we've certainly seen in this country, I think, a lot more flooding than we've had before. What sort of things? What is the effects that we're likely to experience?
Well, near and medium term, what you're going to see is more extremes coming more frequently that will have impacts on infrastructure and food producing capabilities in various areas, and those will be the seriousness will depend on where it hits. 5 or 6 years ago, I think there was a general kind of a understanding out there that sort of went like, oh, those poor people in the developing world, they're really going to get hit by this more than the rest of us because they're in those tropical areas, and the rains and storms and floods and droughts are going to be so severe there. But what's kind of evolved in the last 3 to 5 years is a pattern of extreme weather that's hitting the developed nations in the temperate world, in the temperate zone. And to me, that's both, it's concerning, but it's also hopeful, because it means that people in the developed world are going to start to get hammered enough that they're going to have to pay attention. And I think what we saw last year was a perfect example of that. And we're still, we've actually been in kind of a relative lull in terms of strong temperature increases, because we've had so many back-to-back La Nina events in the last 5 years. When the next El Nino warming event comes along, that's going to be a very, very interesting year indeed. But let me just say, going further down the pike, and the reason that I say planet buster type events, if you look back in the paleo record over deep, deep time, hundreds of millions of years, when you see big changes in the atmosphere take place over very short periods of time, and by that I mean 20,000 or 100,000 years, we're going to be doing it in about 200. When we've seen those in the past, we've very often seen associated global extinction events. And some of those events were characterized by very, very unpleasant and nasty developments in terms of toxic gases coming from the ocean and desertification and changes that were basically incompatible with the existing life forms at the time. So we would hope to avoid that. And I think that's, most people would say that's possible. But
what scares me?
Keep,
what scares? Tell me, sorry. Do carry on. Well, I was just going to say, what scares me is not so much the flooding. We can sort of like deal with that to an extent. What scares me is the one of the things you mentioned, the capacity to produce food. Because if we start losing that, then we are in serious shit, aren't we?
Right. Right. Concordance said he wanted to talk.
Yeah, every scientific field has some Armageddon scenario. I think the climatologists are probably going to be first to see that it's realized. But, you know, in infectious disease, we talk about the great pandemic that would wipe out, you know, the Spanish influenza of what was 1916, 17, wiped out 1 out of every 3 people on Earth, quite possibly. Records are a little bit spotty, but it could be as high as 1 out of every 3 people. You know, the bodies would be stacked in giant piles because even then they didn't have air travel and they didn't have all of the amenities that make disease spreading so easy today. The same thing is true. We have become a global monoculture, monocropping society. We depend on 4 basic staple crops in almost every nation for 90% of our calories. And a few very highly overbred cattle and sheep and goats. It would not take much for a disease to adapt to this enormously plentiful food source. If we couldn't get to it in time, it could wipe out the vast majority of our food source. And we would have global starvation, war. You know, it would be the utter collapse of society. We could have a meteor, a black meteor, inbound, you know, with our name written on it right now. Every field has some horrible, terrible way for society to just absolutely collapse. Economics, you know, everything is built on so much faith in the global economy that if that faith were shaken even just a little bit, we'd all be down to how much gold we have in the bank somewhere, how much gold we have hidden under our bed. So climatology have the privilege of being able to tell us exactly when it will happen. But there are any number of ways for us to snuff it as a society or as a species that I think we all block it out. We become extremely good at blocking out these fears that we all have. And you know, growing up, Peter, you and I both didn't know if tomorrow would bring nuclear Armageddon. That was a very real political scenario. How do you reach people who have grown up with this, who've grown up with coping mechanisms to just basically deny the inevitability of the end of our species or the possible catastrophes and the unavoidable types of outcomes?
Well, I just realized, first of all, I should be plugging my project here, which is darksnowproject.org. Darksnowproject.org. That's the trip to Greenland we'll be doing to research that this summer. In terms of the Armageddon scenarios, one of the unique things about climate change is that outside of the meteor strike, it has an exacerbating effect on just about all of those scenarios: economics, biology, crops, and certainly you touch on a good one with the possible impacts of emerging disease organisms and things like that. But what is kind of unique and fiendish about the climate issue is that we've built the very infrastructure and kind of lifeblood of our society on the burning of carbon fuels, and we've also developed a corporate power structure which is completely vested in extracting the full value of all of their fossil fuel holdings over the next 100 years, which would be in the many, many, many trillions of dollars. So the financial incentive to behave in ways that are just about going to guarantee a global catastrophe is huge, and we are in the position of having to push back I hope with the tools that technology has given us through the internet and through media and education, and hopefully through our political tools of democracy, to be able to turn that around. Now, one of the hopeful ways forward is coming from technology, which in terms of renewable energy, solar energy, wind energy, these things are growing at phenomenal rates, and we can say with some certainty that in the coming decade, this is going to really change the way that energy is produced and distributed throughout the developed and the developing world. Whether it's fast enough is still anybody's guess.
I read recently that China is one of the biggest sort of like expansions of wind energy in the world.
That's correct.
Yeah, but they're also the world's largest polluter and the most consumer of coal. So I don't think you can count on the Chinese to be environmentally conscious. I think they very much are trying.
Be kind.
They're trying to catch up to us, and to do that, they're having to burn everything they've got.
And on top of that, whilst they might be making the largest number of windmills, are they all for export?
No, they're actually importing it.
No, they're using it. Yeah, they're
importing it for their own use.
There's a lot to speak for wind. It's a much smaller installation.
Wonderful.
And lower
I'm sorry, Kunz, what really irritates me is when people say, "Oh, I don't want a wind farm near me because it spoils the scenery." I go down to Cornwall most New Year's, and just before I get to where I stay, there's a huge wind farm, and I always think it's absolutely beautiful. You have these huge windmills, and normally when I arrive, it's sort of like the sun is setting, and I think it looks wonderful.
They're gorgeous.
But also, they're also
statues.
posting them off seas. We've got one off the east coast of England. No one can see, but it's sort of like generating all sorts of power. I think wind is awesome. Anyway, I am acutely aware that Spiny Norman has been waiting for some time patiently.
Hey now, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Excellent. Mr. Sinclair, I want to say thank you for your channel. It's an excellent source for all types of alternative energy. I particularly like your video about pump storage with wind power. It was really cool. I use it a lot in my arguments for people who are against wind. But what I really wanted to mention was Neil deGrasse Tyson's recent appearance, or I'm not sure how recent it was actually, but his appearance on the Bill Maher show. He was talking to it says here, GM executive Lutz on climate change. And what he said that kind of really ended the whole debate between Mr. Maher and Lutz was, if you're really for a particular idea, then you have to put your money where your ideas are. And he said, if you put your money in ideas that say that global warming is not happening, then he has no doubt that those investments will be within 50 years broke. And he kind of ended the whole debate right there. I was like, that's fucking brilliant. That's exactly what I have to say more often. And with that, I was thinking, what can we as just the regular people invest in to possibly cash in on that?
Gardens.
Well, okay. First,
I'm kidding.
Yeah. First of all, let's say let's remind ourselves that Bob Lutz, the guy you're talking about, who's been a General Motors executive. I believe he's retired now. By all accounts, a brilliant engineer, but total moron as far as climate change. But at the same time, he is responsible for the Chevy Volt, which is like a huge advance in auto technology that is going to spring a whole lot of new possibilities for us to lower our carbon footprint. And so the car companies and many of the large Fortune 500 corporations in the United States have gotten it that climate change is real. It's going to present both challenges and opportunities. and many of them are moving with quite a bit of speed to take advantage of those opportunities. So so your argument is spot on, and it's not been lost on I would say the majority of our high corporate leadership.
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying. Well, it wasn't my argument; it was Neil deGrasse Tyson's argument. I just thought it was really a really powerful way of basically dealing with anybody who is a denier or a supporter of global warming. Not that there's anything to deny. I started off as a skeptic myself, but anyway, I wanted to bring up just one more point. Just getting off that topic. Sorry, I think you answered really well. I was wondering if there's also anything we should be doing to push for the debate between somebody like Christopher Monckton and Potholer 54 to get him back into that debate again.
No.
Well,
I'll tell you why
yeah.
it fell. I'm sorry, Peter, I've got to interrupt. I'll tell you why it fell, but Monckton
Please.
won't agree. He will only do debates, as many of these people with fringe views, if we're going to be as polite as that, will not debate unless everything is under their control. And given the exchanges that have taken place between Potholer 54 and Monckton, I have absolutely no doubt that he will refuse to agree. Monckton doesn't tend to get into too many debates. He just gives lectures. That's why I don't think it will happen. Sorry, Peter, I interrupted you.
On top of that, I mean, the bottom line is, if the guy puts his media out there in the public arena, you can take it apart there just as easily. In fact, that's arguably a better way to do it, because then you can actually go away and actually check. Yeah, this is a large part of what Potholer does, is you go away and you actually check the facts. And those are things that you can't easily do in a debate. And, nor do subjects like this, which, can be contingent on a lot of very specialized knowledge, lend themselves well to public debates. I mean, especially when, you're the typical member of the public will struggle reading graphs. Looked at like that, all that Joe Public will see in a debate will be two people pointing at lots of graphs. It'll, I'm not so sure it would mean lots to them. Whereas, if he puts his talk out there, you can just take it apart at your leisure.
Peter.
Well, I have a confession to make. I think that opportunity did arise.
Well, everyone's sitting down. Make sure you're sitting down. Peter's got a confession. Go on.
I think I may have inadvertently screwed that pooch.
Damn you!
What happened was, Monckton was a frequent poster on, and probably still is, on one of the major denial websites, which is called What's Up With That. And the principal of that website, Anthony Watts, was also posting some blowback from Potholer, who I'm sure many people will know produces just an outstanding video series and had done some really great work taking apart Monckton's arguments. And there was an agreement, more or less informal agreement, that there would be a debate online between Monckton and Potholer, which would have been the ideal format because everything could have been linked and checked and sourced, which is, of course, the absolute death of Monckton and climate denial arguments, when you can go directly to the source, and that's the strength of the internet. Now, I was aware of this, and so I contacted Potholer and I said, this is really amusing. Maybe you and I should have a little online chat about this, because, maybe we can help to drum up a little interest. And he thought that might be a good idea, and we hit it on really well. And so we did a little Skype chat. We uploaded it to my channel. And then Anthony Watts used that excuse because of that horrible greenman3610 who's hateful and awful and has in the past made fun of Mr. Watts mercilessly, he used that as an excuse to shut down the whole exercise, at which point I'm sure everyone would die of relief on his end, because that would have been no holds barred massacre in favor of Potholer. There's no doubt. So I feel terrible about that I gave them that opening.
All respect I had for you, Peter, is now evaporated. I can't believe it. If it hadn't been for that, he would have found a different excuse. But just going back to something, if I may, you said that you interviewed Monckton a couple of months ago. I've seen him being interviewed before, and what strikes me is that he becomes very defensive and very belligerent and aggressive when he's sort of like put in a corner. Did you find that when you were discussing issues with him?
Absolutely. I was really trying hard. I was really trying hard, but I had to question him at a few points, and that's what things kind of unraveled at a certain level. So maybe the less said, the better.
Mr. Sinclair, have you ever said anything hateful ever? It seems like you're the nicest guy.
I'm a very nice guy. But if you go back over my videos, I can find somewhere. There's certainly some things I said that probably could have been said less snarkily, and of course, if you make fun of someone like Anthony Watts,
although it must be said that in the arena, your snarkiest, nastiest comment, I think, would be vanilla compared to mine, though. Yeah, I mean, I would agree that you are the height of diplomacy and decorum. What you call snarkiness, I don't think even makes it above the signal to noise on the wider web.
Well, that would be my argument, but go to a foundation and try to get some funding based on that. Where was I?
Well, you were sort of like knocking
Mr. Watts,
Monckton, which is always good fun. So do carry on.
This is a good story. When I first started the series, a number of months in, I was starting to get a little bit of an audience, and all of you, I'm sure, know how difficult it is to get even 1,000 views on a video. I mean, it's like pushing a stone up a hill. When I decided to take P.T. Barnum's advice, and if you want to draw a crowd, start a fight, and I started looking around for someone who might be kind of paranoid and thin-skinned and pompous and maybe unable to take any kind of ribbing. And I identified Anthony Watts as being exactly that person, and also someone with a pretty high visibility. And I decided to make a video which basically not only skewered his purported science, but kind of made fun of him as an individual. And he took huge exception to that and did a DMCA block on my video, which of course attracted a vast amount of attention that I never would otherwise have gotten, and eventually got the video posted on probably dozens of sites around the web and written up all over in blogs that had not taken any notice of me up to that point. So my viewership went from a few hundred to like tens of thousands in the space of a week or two, courtesy of Mr. Anthony Watts. So while he's said some nasty things about me and I've made fun of him, I have to say I owe him a lot in terms of circulation boosting.
Yeah, it has to be said, and Jamesy666 has posted in the chat, DMCAs never really work in the way people want them to. It just gets you publicity. Hopefully, by the powers of technology and the wonders of Tony, we're going to see a short video that Thunder, I think, posted on YouTube only a few hours ago. So fingers crossed. Oh,
well, maybe.
No, we're
Okay.
saying it, Thunder. So if we all mute ourselves,
Okay.
people will be able to see.
Okay, so what we need for this project is a couple of Petri dishes, some tap water. I'll need a syringe. What we need to do now is we put the filter on there. Let's just make sure that that's tared. And there we go. Okay. Okay. So, in that one, we have 40.2 grams. And now it's milk. Yeah. Okay, that's about $10. Yeah, that'll do. Okay. So
I'm not seeing any video of if something that's supposed to be.
It is playing, unfortunately, somewhat staccato, so to speak, on Ustream. But it does
okay
keep.
for me.
Okay. Well, we'll just carry on with it.
That's 3 degrees on that one. That's 3 degrees on that one, so it's 3.0-ish. 3.0-ish. They're being frozen exactly the same freezer. This is activated carbon. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some activated carbon. This will be less than a... plenty. Alright, so this is a fraction of a milligram now. Carbon on there. Just to prove the point. Okay. That's one. And that's the other. I also have this, which is an infrared light. 150 watt infrared light.
Maybe we should point out how this relates to the melting of ice on Greenland.
I think it's probably better to do that after the video is finished, Peter.
So, it looks like it's almost finished.
All the video seems to have frozen for me. Is that true for you guys?
It's working fine for people in the chat.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Let's get the infrared lamp out of the way. So, firstly, oh, there's not much left. Oh, I don't know, maybe as much as half. Okay. How much do you weigh? 11.73. There you go. And now Oh, oh wow. Well, there you go. So, what's that? That's about 10%. 10% difference for a few milligrams of soot. Not bad.
Right. So maybe Peter should set up what his project is in Greenland first. And then this experiment will make some more sense.
And just
Sure.
as Peter does that, can I just explain to the viewers that Concordance had technical issues and has had to leave us, so you're just stuck with Thunder, myself, and Peter. Sorry, Peter, do carry on.
Okay, very good. I'm working with a leading Greenland scientist, Dr. Jason Box of the Bird Institute, who has been studying a steady observed darkening of the Greenland ice sheet that he feels is in part responsible for the increased melt that we've seen, including the record melt of last summer. Dr. Box has written some of the most cogent and accurate papers predicting this melt increase. And he's going to Greenland this summer, and I'm going along to document with him. We're going to take samples of the ice to look at the impact of increased soot from more and more wildfires that are occurring, especially around North America, that are depositing on the Greenland ice sheet, and whether that increased soot is a part of this darkening process and perhaps some kind of a climate feedback effect that may become more and more significant in coming years. We're doing this as a citizen science project. We're crowdsourcing it at darksnowproject.org, darksnowproject.org, and we'll be doing some public events upcoming. This is really the first one, but we'll be doing a public event in New York, April 21st at Union Square, which will be rather spectacular. And we've got enough funding, just enough funding right now that'll get us to Greenland. We're trying to raise additional funding so that we'll have more capabilities and latitude once we do get there. We'll be up for about 10 days. And what Thunder so graciously and amazingly in such a short time put together is a video, quick video experiment, just sort of a kind of a quick and dirty or quick and sooty look at soot-free ice versus soot-infected ice to see how whether there was a difference in energy absorption. And it's not a completely one-to-one correspondence to the ice sheet, but it does give us a general idea of how much more rapidly even a relatively small deposition can affect ice melt. So, you know, I'm astounded that anybody would spend so much time and care to do such a thing on short order.
Thunder does have his good points. Somebody in the chat there has asked this question, I think a valid one. Have there not always been fires?
Yes, absolutely. And if you go up to any of the ice sheets, you'll find soot, and you'll find other kinds of darkening agents, ocean spray, dust from deserts, and of course more recently industrialized kind of dust, cook fires and smoke from Asia in particular, and Africa all ends up being deposited there. But we have seen a large increase in wildfires over the last decade. We have measured quite a dramatic darkening of the ice sheet itself over the last decade. And Dr. Box published a paper about a year ago which predicted, based on that darkening, that we would soon see a melt over the entire Greenland ice sheet. The entire sheet would begin to soften and melt at the surface, that is, which has not been observed because the highest levels of the ice sheet are 12,000 feet high and they remain way, way, way below zero normally. But we, in fact, observed that melt in early July of last year over the entire sheet. It got a lot of news coverage, and huge amounts of water came off of the ice sheet that was washing out bridges and roads that had stood for decades. And we do have the satellite observations that show wildfire smoke, soot in contact with the ice sheet, but we have not yet ground truth the actual samples of the ice to take a look at how much is being deposited there. Is it a significant input forcing above and beyond the normal forcing? And we're also going to be bringing a bright young graduate student from Denmark who is looking at an additional possible forcing, which is that, and this was unbeknownst to me until I started getting onto glaciers in the last couple of years, there are actually organisms, algae and things like that live on the glacier, and they produce dark colored material to protect themselves against some of the elements in that harsh environment. And we may, in fact, be with our industrial effluent fertilizing and promoting the growth of this biome on top of the ice sheet, which is also another darkening factor. So we're going to be sampling to look at that as well, and I'll be interviewing that scientist in the coming weeks and hopefully posting some video on that as well.
Thunder, I'm going to invite you to explain the science behind the experiment that you did, but a lot of people in the chat inviting a particular person to call in, whether W1M2 wants to join us or anyone else does. Send a Skype contact request to Magic Sandwich Show, all one word, and we'll see if we can get you on. There's another 20 or so minutes to go. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to step away from the computer for a moment, but Thunder, explain exactly what was going on in that video.
Right, so what you need, there are a couple of things you need to understand. The first is that to melt ice takes basically a constant amount of energy. And so how quickly the ice melts gives you a direct measure of how much energy it absorbs. So what we have in this experiment is two identical masses of 40 grams each of frozen ice, frozen to exactly the same temperature. You then put an infrared lamp above both of them, and if you actually watch, you'll see they'll actually swap their places every 2 minutes or something. That's just to ensure that they get exactly the same amount of radiance on both of them. And on top of one of them is sprinkled a few milligrams of soot. And what you find is the one which has had a few milligrams of soot sprinkled on top, about 10% more of it had melted for the same amount of light light fell on both samples, but the one with soot on had absorbed about 10% more energy. And that is very much, I think, the principle that Peter is going to Greenland, is to actually measure how much soot there is in the ice and the effects that it's likely to have. Although whilst I was actually doing this, I did notice something which you might not have thought of, Peter, but that there is a third mechanism why actually having the particles might augment the melting, and that's it's basically microcirculation. That because you're actually generating heat on the particles themselves, that generates mixing in itself. So if you were to get you get these thermal gradients on the surface of the ice, where it's warmer at the surface and cold underneath, and it's stable like that. And so the only way to act, it's a very slow process to transfer the heat through. So it gives you a sort of thermal barrier. You put some dirt in there, and that heats up, and it causes convection currents. You know, it's all on a very small scale. But if you actually take a look at the video, you'll see there are all these. It may just be that there are those convection currents in both samples, and you can only easily see them when the dirt is there. But you can actually see the dirt moving around in these little convection currents. It's just a thought.
Again, astounding. And this is something that I've grown to appreciate by hanging out with more scientists. I'm not a scientist myself. I have been a science geek, kind of a science nerd all my life, but somewhere around ninth grade mathematics realized that that wasn't going to be an area that I was going to be real comfortable with. But I think your idea about the particles absorbing the heat and the sort of creating a warmer micro environment, I think is really well put, if I'm understanding that correctly. There's probably a lot to be said about these dynamics, and one of the scientists that we'll be going up with is Mackenzie Skiles, who's a PhD student, I believe at UCLA. She has been working on the dynamics of particle absorption on the ice caps of the Rocky Mountains, in particular with dust that blows up there from the Great Basin and other places. And to listen to her talk about it, which you can if you check out my playlist or go to darksnowproject.org. It's clear that there's a lot of work that's been done on this, and it's not as simple or even as obvious as maybe we would like it to be. It's nothing in this area of science is simple or easy or obvious, it seems. But that's one reason why we want to get up there and take some samples and actually see what is going on. There are some pretty sensitive instruments that up until 5 or 10 years ago you couldn't bring out into the field. We'll be bringing those out. We're going to chopper up to the top of the ice sheet at several locations. Depending on how much funding we have, we'll be able to go to more locations and take more samples. And we'll be digging ice pits. We'll be taking ice cores, and we'll be measuring with various kinds of portable spectrometers, both the incoming and reflected radiation. And so it should be a really interesting swath of data that we come back with, and that'll be Dr. Box and Mackenzie Skiles and some of his other colleagues' job to analyze that, which I'm sure will keep them busy for a long time.
Peter, can I ask this question? I'm sure many scientists are trying to work on ways to effectively counteract what's happening. Are there any plans or ideas that you're aware of that you have a degree of optimism about?
Well, I don't know about optimism. It's looking more and more like eventually there's going to have to be some kind of technological intervention. The most promising will be technologies that we're all pretty familiar and comfortable with, which would be like forestry and agriculture, which have a tremendous capacity to absorb and sequester carbon if we institute the right kind of increasing our forestation around the world, and maybe change some of our agricultural practices so that they become actual carbon sinks instead of sources of greenhouse gases. There's a lot of potential for that. There are some ideas being bandied around. I think some of the ones that get the most press, like squirting sulfate particles up into the atmosphere to reflect sun and things like that, are probably not going to happen because there's just too many potential pitfalls of doing things like that wholesale to the atmosphere when we don't really understand what the effects are going to be. There are some of the more far-fetched ideas, like actually launching mirrors into space to reflect back sun. I think that's kind of a non-starter too, unless things get really out of hand. But I also think there are technologies that are still under development. For instance, for producing fuel, liquid fuel, directly from atmospheric CO2, which it seems that there are several pathways being developed to do that under the DARPA-E program of the U.S. Department of Energy, and as well as programs in other countries outside the United States. It sounds crazy, but it actually from what I'm hearing, there are some fairly credible breakthroughs that have been made in those areas, and that would be certainly a promising area if we could develop ways to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere to make useful products. I would hope that might be something that would be doable, particularly if it's powered by renewable energy, whatever the process is. So
I'm sorry. Do finish, Peter.
I'm done. Go ahead.
Thunder, just before I come to you for your observations, if people, in fact, I finished eating, so I can turn my camera back on now. Thank you to whoever it was that suggested I did that. If you don't want to call in and you've got any questions, simply post them in the chat and I'll read them out. Thunder, what are your views? Do you think science and technology is going to come to a solution, an easy solution, I suppose is the way to put it?
What, for global warming? Not a chance. There are no easy solutions for the simple mass balance involved. I mean, just take a look at it this way. We've been burning fossil fuels for, well, let's just say 50 or 100 years, and we got a load of energy out for doing that. That means that you've got to put at least that much energy back in to turn it back into carbon of one sort or another. I mean, just assuming that they're all, there's a rough reversibility on the thermodynamics. Where would you get the energy to do it? I mean, the only energy source that we've got that can do it is basically trees and sunlight. And there's a limit to the rate that can sort of sequester this stuff. And even if they do, the organic stuff dies and gets eaten by microorganisms. What are your alternatives? In terms of getting millions of tons of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, there really aren't that many options. Oh yeah, there have been things banded around like, what do? You seed coccoliths, and these are little microorganisms that make carbonate shells. They turn
the cliffs of Dover white, don't they?
They are the reason that the cliffs of Dover are white. Yeah, I mean you're on the right tracks. No, I mean almost everything that I've seen in terms of dealing with carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is almost always geared about dealing with effects, not about really addressing the problem. Yeah, so I mean there are steps to stop releasing this stuff as quickly, but what are your options in terms of trying to get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere? There really aren't that many.
The Thunder's correct that it's a big problem energetically to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere, and the CO2 that's up there is will be eventually drawn out slowly by processes in the crust and in the ocean of the planet. But those processes are millennial timescale. They're beyond human timescale. So a good deal of the carbon that we have put up there in the last 200 years is going to still be there 1,000 years and from now. Really, the only conceivable processes you can imagine would be ones that were entirely solar powered in some form, and I think we can imagine a number of those processes, but they certainly don't exist yet. And the sheer volume of the carbon that is up there that has to come out, if you just think in terms of all the oil that's ever been pumped and all the coal that's ever been mined, all the gas that's ever been drawn out, that's a unbelievably huge volume of material, and so that alone presents an enormous kind of a practical problem. So that's why I think working on, as a beginning, working on forestry and agricultural practices will be key. But the number one, what we have to do is stop digging, stop making the problem worse, and that's what I'm working on is trying to educate people and push the political dialogue to the point where we all get that, and where we institute some policies to make that part happen.
Well, we have 8 minutes left to go. No callers lined up, but I have to say that I'm left with a certain sense of doom and despair. Is there any note of optimism that we can find in the last 8 minutes to allow people to sleep comfortably at night?
You'll be dead long before you have to worry about dealing with the consequences.
Well, I'm not sure that that's true, though, because I'm, not personally, because
the real consequences
live a few feet above sea level, but the consequences are obviously happening now. So as I say, I imagine, Peter, you wouldn't try and convince me otherwise. The increased amounts of floods that we've had, the fact that seasons don't really seem to change a great deal, that sort of thing is a consequence of global warming.
Let me jump in real
Sure.
quickly here. The near-term consequences that bother me the most, we got a pretty good preview of that a couple years ago in Pakistan when there was a block in the jet stream that simultaneously caused a historic heat and drought event in Russia, the worst that their agricultural records show for 1,000 years going back, and at the same time historic monsoon rains in Pakistan that basically caused the evacuation of about 20% of the country and had a huge impact on the agricultural system. 50 years ago, when disasters like that happened in the developing world, those of us in the first world could kind of shake our heads, and if we thought about it at all, maybe we'd make an extra donation to the Red Cross and hope that those poor people in the developing world could somehow get through it. But we're now at a point where some of these people are nuclear armed, and many people in a place like Pakistan who would like to take power in that country are people who look at the world very, very differently than we in the West do. And that's why, so my biggest trepidations near term will be not specifically from, say, sea level rise or one of those more dramatic visual effects that we think about, but the destabilization of some of the developing world by these extreme events. And perfect example would be the Russian heat and drought that I mentioned caused Russia to stop exporting grain in 2010. They had to stop because their crop had failed so badly that they had to keep it all for home use. And they being a massive exporter of grain, that caused grain prices to soar. And the high grain prices were one of the direct causal factors of this earthquake that we call the Arab Spring that's been ongoing for the last couple of years. Started in Tunisia with food riots. And so that is a perfect example of how climate imbalance can spill over into our political system and our system of international relations and our economies, and possibly create major repercussions long before we see some of the very worst effects of climate change itself.
Thunder, did you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's about right. Droughts, not droughts, extreme weather events, strong winds like the hurricane. They can damage a bit of infrastructure, but they're not. They're indicative. They make headlines, but probably the biggest real impact you'll have is the food supply. There's this old axiom that any civilization is 3 meals away from revolution. And we've all grown up in a world of plentiful food where this has never really been a problem. Many of us have never really known hunger beyond our own lack of planning to get enough bread from the supermarket or something. But how many years would you need the crops to fail in America, and all of a sudden, when you don't have enough food for the people, it's probably going to get ugly fairly quickly. And they had a really bad drought in Texas 2 years running, and the second one. The first one was the one where Rick Perry prayed for rain, and the next year they got an even bigger drought. Is that right?
I thought it was last year that he prayed for rain, and it came when the atheists had a convention somewhere in Texas. I think. But I mean, this goes back to one of the issues that we were discussing at the very beginning about whether climate denialists are of a particular political ilk, and it does seem that when you've got the likes of Rick Perry, who had huge support for that, and they're going to pray for rain as opposed to addressing the issue, that again I'm left with a great deal of pessimism about the future. If elected officials like him consider prayer is a better solution than actually addressing the issues, what hope is there for us? Peter, leave us. We've got a few minutes left. Leave us with some optimism, Peter.
Well, I have to be optimistic. I think that we're getting it. I think that the progress in renewable energy is reached a point now analogous to where the internet was in about 1993. And I think that over the coming 5 years, we're going to see an explosion of renewables such that whether you are concerned about climate change or not, it's going to be impossible to deny how that is changing our society and changing the way we deal with energy. So I'm hoping that maybe the planet will give us a few unexpected breaks here. Maybe we'll have some negative feedbacks that will possibly develop some carbon sinks that have not yet been identified. Maybe some of the processes that have been running really fast will slow down just as a matter of kind of run of the odds, maybe. and possibly we'll get enough of a break that we can go ahead. But I have kids, and so I have to be incurably optimistic that we're going to deal with this, and the planet's going to take a hit. But I think there's good reason to hope that it will be a manageable hit, and that we'll come out of it on the other end as much more aware and enlightened of what our role is on this planet and what our responsibilities are.
On that note, I think it's a suitable note to just draw things to a close, unless, Thunder, you wanted a last word?
No, I think that's a good optimistic note to leave it on.
I have to say that I don't think you have to have children to hope that you leave the planet in a better place than you joined it, but it does make you think, I suppose, concentrate the mind a little bit. Okay, on that note, thank you all for coming to join us. I know it was our first show on Ustream. In fact, whilst we're still on, give me some feedback. We were thinking of doing Vaughan TV as well. Are people happy with Ustream? I think it's more stable than Vaughan, so we're likely to carry on with this for the time being. Whilst you're posting comments, if you would, just to remind people of a number of things. Firstly, this video will be posted onto YouTube probably within 48 hours. You can also download it as an MP3 file. The best way to find the links to that, we have iTunes and also FeedBurner. The best way to find them is to go to the Magic Sandwich Show website, which is www.magicsandwichshow.com, and go to the iTunes tab, and you'll find links to both of those, the FeedBurner and the iTunes. What else? Oh, you can also follow us on Twitter at the capital T, capital H, capital E, DPR Jones, lowercase. And you get notification of future shows and also occasionally some interesting Twitters. I quite like retweeting the Pope. I don't know whether people follow the Pope on Twitter, but they are the most mundane tweets you will ever come across. We also have a Facebook page and, as I say, the website. Links to all of those will be in the description of the video when it's posted, as will all links that are relevant that have been discussed during the course of the show. Unfortunately, no one could give a thumbs up. I think the way you do a thumbs up is to do a less than sign followed by a 3. I think that's the way to do it. But for those, so there's been a very interesting show. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And remember to mention the Darksnow project.
The Darksnow project, all of that will be included in the links to the video when it's posted. So thank you all very much for watching. Thank you to Tony, who's done, again, an excellent job. As I say, I suspect that we will be on Ustream for, well, the foreseeable future. Oh, look, you found them. I don't know where you find these avatars, but there we go. Thank you very much. And I have to finish on a personal note. In just under half an hour's time, obviously, the Atheist Experience show will start on Ustream. And it was 1 week ago today when I was in Austin, Texas. At this time, I was in Matt Dillahunty's house, eating pizza, playing cards, and being fed by his wife a load of moonshine. So doesn't time fly? It seems a lot longer ago than that, but it was only a week ago. So I'm sure Matt probably is not watching, but thank you very much for your hospitality if you are, Matt. It was great fun. On that note, I think we'll wrap it up. Do stay with us, Peter. We'll end the show and carry on the conversation afterwards. But thank you all very much, and as I say, I hope to see you in 2 weeks' time. Oh, one last thing. I think this is our 49th show. History is a little bit vague about it. Our 50th show, I know a month or so ago, I messaged a few people to see if they would come and celebrate our 50th show. Those that agreed, if my memory serves me correctly, are Non-Stamp Collector, Dark Matter, and Andrew Copson. So in 2 weeks' time, hopefully, to celebrate our 50th show, we'll be joined by them. So come and join us in 2 weeks' time with Non-Stamp Collector, Dark Matter, Andrew Copson, and probably some of the usual suspects. It's been great fun. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time.